All right. Hello, everybody.
All right. Welcome to episode 2 of the Uncensored Crew podcast, where we keep it 100 all the time. Big pressing issue for today's episode that just from scrolling through social media this week, and this is more pertaining to Canada, and hopefully our American friends, I should say, catch on to what's going on if you haven't already. Canadians are scared of our federal administration. They have officially overstepped their boundaries. Not that they hadn't before, but it's at a point where I think people are losing hope and not sure what to do. What have you seen?
I want to jump in and see. There's some things from the administration and how, let's say, what we're coming off is from the people who have previously supported the Liberal government in Canada. There's been examples that they're kind of afraid of what's coming from out of Parliament. Mm-hmm. But this is not, I don't want to create any more fear than anything that's needed. It's just to be more aware, of course. If we just focus on how we react to things, then we should be okay. But I definitely want to be part in taking that. We should be aware that the Liberal government is not doing anything right in regards to confidence of even their own people. And there's been a few examples of friends that have been from that support the Liberal Party. Sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, for the last 2 years, I've been one of those people that have said, government doesn't scare me. No administration is going to run my life, control what I say or what I do. But even for me now, I've gotten to the point where I don't know what each day looks like. I don't know whether, because of my personal choices, tomorrow I'm going to have an officer come to my door and attempt to take me to a concentration camp. Or try and force...
I live in the same conditions.
Or try and force a chemical into my body against my will.
When it comes to officers coming to the door, I will be respectful, but in regards to if they're going to say, you take it, no. You have no right to my medical information if I have taken it or not. That chemical. When the government forces you to do anything, it's usually not in your best interest, because we've seen examples in history. And I want to use my grandfather as an example. He fought in World War II, which got health concerns out of that, so that World War II, that tyrannical person that was the bad guy in that scenario. He had health problems coming back from that war.
As did many.
Part of my life, I did know him until I was 8 years old. I still remember him. Health concerns from that. I'm not saying it will get to a war, but
the signs are there.
The signs are there. I can't help but say it. And I don't support anybody being put in a camp. I'm sorry. There's already people in camps in Australia for this chemical, and you guys probably know what we're referring to, but there was an article that came out of Australia that they took 40,000 kids from their parents and put them in a camp. That's almost happened here. There's already adults that have already gone to these isolation camps to make sure they don't have this certain disease.
Of course, we are speaking in code terms because for anyone who's unaware, the mainstream platforms that we post this on, if you say anything about the CV, it's the only acceptable term right now, CV. If you say anything about it that goes against the narrative, you get shut down, pretty much.
That's not going to stop us from talking about it, though.
And to go back to the camps, this sounds a lot like 1940s Germany. Like almost, you know what? It is pretty much to a T because the leader here in Canada, Mr. Justin Trudeau, has almost directly quoted Hitler. And I can't believe that after...
Very similar words.
If not the same words. And I can't believe after almost 26 years, I'm in my 26th year on this planet, but 26 years in Canada, that I've had to hear that come out of my own leader's mouth. Not that he is my leader, because I don't have any respect left for him, either as a politician or as a human at this point. But it's something I never thought I would hear, ever.
I want to point out that it's not one side against the other from how our perspective. My perspective, if there's anybody that needs help, I would give it to them. No matter what party. I wouldn't be like, what party?
No, it doesn't matter.
I wouldn't ask that. If you need help, I'll help you if I'm in the position to do so.
That is the...
And that position is like, I would probably give you a coat off my back if I have an extra coat. Like,
that is the traditional way that, as Canadians, we were raised.
Canada here. In Canada, it's really cold, so if I don't have a coat myself, I can't go outside because it's minus 30 already. I would die. If I was positioned to buy a person a coat, if they needed a coat, I would do that. I do have that type of money to buy a person. That's regards the point. But out of that example, I would help anybody. I don't care if they're liberal, libertarian, conservative, anybody.
Now, as for what the response has been from Canadians alike, who are now, I want to say it's almost becoming a form of unity, because I don't think everybody is, but there's a majority starting to form. And I'm going to give a shout out here to the Canadian Truckers Association, because as of the day that this will go live on YouTube, it'll be probably the 24th of January. The Canadian Truckers Association has formed a convoy in every part of this country: BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI. They are all in this together and are on a convoy to Ottawa to end all the mandates. It's not just for truckers. This did start with truckers trying to cross the border. If they didn't have papers, they would be forced to quarantine for 2 weeks. From what I understood, and it was supposed to be for 2 weeks unpaid, which is a major blow for anyone to go 2 weeks without pay, especially as our economy here in Canada is collapsing. And so the truckers have said, no, enough is enough. It's time that Mr. Trudeau gets a message and that we start taking our country back. So, shout out to Canadian Truckers Association and the rapid response they've taken on this and decided to send a message to our administration on behalf of the Canadians who fear them.
Just thinking of what else to make a point on. The truckers, since you brought up this, the truckers are trying to stand up because they're a really working hard community. And if you're wondering about the community, they are on radios all the time. They do communicate with each other. They are usually, they don't get to see their families for weeks on a time.
Sometimes months.
At a time. Yeah, sometimes months, depending on if they're international in North America. I know my brother used to be a trucker, and he did long haul down into the United States from Canada and back multiple times, and he wasn't able to see much of his family either. Are they doing this out of spite or hatred for the government? No. This is freedom for
all Canadians.
The future. And the people that I've heard that are in government saying, you could probably guess who and find out for yourself, that says it's not about freedom, it's about health. Anyway, we already know it's not about freedom.
I mean, it's not about health.
But we also know it's
not
about
it never
health.
has been.
It's about control and body autonomy. Once we lose that body autonomy, we won't have a Canada anymore.
And at this point, I'll say this because I know we're going to get people mainly from the left trying to jump down our throats here, and anyone who has taken the CV. Look, if you've taken it, that's fine. All the power to you, because that's your own personal decision to make. You have the right to make that choice. But for a leader and for an administration to say that we should not be tolerating the people who have not taken it, who have made the decision to be a little more hesitant on what they put in their own body, where does that come from? That's just pure evil. It's ugly. Like, I know it's hard to...
I want to make a point that liberals, no matter who you are, no matter personal perspective, I want everybody on this video to be encouraged to comment.
Yep.
Be respectful, of course, but
be civil.
We will be respectful as well. We're not going to attack anybody for stating their opinion. Let's be respectful of other opinions, and try and, well, what we do is try and look up as much facts as possible. If you want to, look it up. If you have time, just comment as much as possible. We want to hear it.
Share this episode, like it. Just get the stats on it. Get the interaction going, because
we're not doing... Hey, I'm not paid, so...
Neither of us are paid for this.
And...
Neither of us are paid for this podcast as it stands.
Yeah, as it stands right now, this podcast is out of our own time and personal perspectives of each community. Ike is further out west. I'm in Ontario.
We have two other hosts that will be joining us.
Looks like two other people.
We'll have one from BC, a little further west than me, and one from the US.
Share.
I'm excited for the next few episodes because I know we'll be having another influencer jump in from BC, and she's an absolute she's a badass. She's an absolute firecracker with how she speaks and how she stands up for people.
I wouldn't have gone with that terminology, but
no, I will go with that terminology because she speaks out and okay. She's very vocal with her perspectives and sharing information so it gets out to more people. And I'm also excited for our one host that is down in East Tennessee, who's going to be joining us for an American perspective, because it's important that we get both sides of the border on this and we get kind of a better coverage of not just Canada or not just America, but all of North America together. Because that's just something that where we can all kind of get on the same page. So everyone understands.
I believe that we can be on the same page as long as we get over the name calling and
character attacks,
pointing fingers.
Yeah,
character attacks. It's not needed. What we're getting at is the Liberal Party just putting us in a certain position that we don't like.
It's not right against left,
which is not prime for whole communities. Like this whole dismantling of society needs to stop.
It does, and that's the problem though, is that the administrations currently both in Ottawa and in Washington DC, their goal is to dismantle society. They're trying to create a very dangerous divide. It's no longer left versus right. It's no longer pro CV versus anti CV. It's literally at this point, it needs to be all of us together against them.
In our case, in Ontario, I'm not sure if it's Alberta, but in our case, there's a limit of 5 people that can be in one place at one time. And regardless of that, that's not how democracy works.
No.
We're supposed to talk with people and preferably in person, not just like this.
Right. And I mean, here we don't have the capacity limits enforced by government, but what we do have is certain stores on their own merit putting capacity limits, and that's just a good representation of the ones who are misguided and don't seem to realize that it makes no difference.
Yeah, if you're scared about being infected by a certain disease, I would say wear a mask if you want to. If you want to, that's the whole point. If you want to be going out, be cleanly. Don't be going up to people coughing, or that's common sense, but if you see somebody else that's coughing, be a wide berth out of them. I don't mean 6 feet. I mean,
keep your distance.
Keep your distance from them, and watch what they touch, because, diseases, the whole fact about traveling diseases is on surfaces. If you touch a surface, clean your hands and don't touch your face. I never touch my face, so I don't chew my nails. I scratch my face if it's itchy, but I'm aware of what I touch.
Yeah, and I was going to jump on that too. Like, occasionally I do touch my face. I work from home, but like, if I go out, but if I'm touching things before I go to touch my face, sometimes I'll catch myself touch other things. Let's not do that.
Also, if you're sick, just stay home like anybody else.
Like most people would?
With common sense would.
And this is before, most people that's would. Before this disease. If you had the flu, if you had a cold, if you had whatever, most of the time you took a sick day and you stayed home. Where did we lose that common sense? Where did that go?
Well, it's still around, but
less.
The majority of that, it's less.
The thing that still gets me, that people don't seem to understand, is that the only way that this whole nightmare ends is when we make it end. People say, oh, if you...
All of us need to talk together. Yeah. Say, no. We just have to say no. Mm-hmm. No fighting, nothing. Just no.
People...
It's not out of aggression. It's not out of fighting. It's just saying no to the government.
And
you shall not pass this line.
And I hear both sides of the aisle. I hear different arguments, and I hear the people who have been believing this entire thing saying that, oh, just do what you're told and it ends. No, that's not how it ends. I hear people on the right side saying, oh, this ends with...
That's also coercion, but I'm passing it.
Yeah. And
if you just tell a person, if you're an example, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to attack you, but if you tell a person to say, just obey, that's what governments want.
That's what they want you to do.
To obey.
They want you to obey. And there was a quote, and I want to bring this quote up because just the other day was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, celebrating the legacy of Dr. King. And one thing Martin Luther King said was civil disobedience becomes a sacred duty when administrations become corrupt, when the state becomes corrupt. So with the corruption that's going on, they want you to obey that corruption. They want you to obey exactly what they say. It's your duty to say no, to disobey them, and take your life back. Government doesn't control your life. Government doesn't dictate what you say or do. That is on you.
Also, examples. If you're given the example of you need to do this or you don't get to work, and there's examples out there right now, that's what I would call tyranny. We need to be able to work, obviously, to buy food.
Yeah.
And to get food, you need money, obviously. And some people might not get it. I'm sorry if this is sounding condescending, but it seems to me that some people need to know this. And I'm having to I never thought I'd have to say it, but we need money to survive.
Even if money is the root of all evil, but yes, that's the truth. You need money to survive in today's world. It's just a fact. And I also want to bring this up for the people who I've seen.
Unless you're a farmer, of course. But I'm not a farmer. I'm more of a tech guy.
And I'm glad you brought up the farmers, because this leads beautifully into the next point I wanted to make. And I've been seeing comments mainly on TikTok from this. And other places, but I can't believe some of the stupidity.
I know what you're getting at.
There are people saying, well, we don't need the trucks. We don't need the farmers. I get my food from grocery stores. Okay, you geniuses, it's time for a lesson. Where do you think that comes from? There's this process called farm to table. And the way that works is it starts on the farm where the farmers are harvesting that food and growing and harvesting that food, which then gets taken by the truckers and distributed to your grocery store where you get your food. It's not made from a replicator. You can't survive on fake food. You will die.
It's not a replicators in the grocery store.
No.
Now, I really don't want people to think I'm putting a person down for thinking I'm saying it in a way that makes them feel stupid. But when you're an example that thinks food comes from the grocery store, no. No, it really doesn't.
There are so many different sectors of our economy that I would call natural resources. That's why, because we have people who are paid fishermen.
The economy is farming, so
we have people who are
not just farming, but farming is part of it.
We have farmers who are paid to produce everything you eat, the majority of what you eat. There are paid fishermen who get all your seafood. We have lumberjacks who provide all your wood. The paper that money's printed on, or I guess in Canada now it's plastic, but for the US, I'll put it this way, that the money that's printed on paper, that's coming from lumberjacks too. It starts with the process of wood.
I want to just give an example. We have canola fields in Canada.
Yep.
That's what a lot of the farmers are. And we produce and I think it's export if we were going out, or exports going in. Anyway, shipping it to other countries. For example, we have a lot of canola fields. And canola oil that's in the grocery store, it's $8 a bottle or something for 1 liter. You could do the math, but we used to give China. We would sell it to China, and China has 1.3 billion people, if I am correct. Now, if you can do the math for each $8 a bottle, that's 1.3 billion of those in income to Canada.
Yeah.
And China has stopped that a few years ago. Stopped our canola oil. They're going to, I'm assuming it from some other way. But that's our economy that was just shut down.
A good portion of it, yeah. It's a good portion of our economy that's getting shut down with that.
That's just one of our farms, one of our products. We do a lot of other products, but we also need to have that economy to pay off all our federal debt that we have 2.8 trillion in. And looked up a few stats.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most recent, is that we're $2.8 trillion in debt. And I want to transition from that.
It might have changed a little bit, but
yeah, by the time you're seeing this, it'll probably change by maybe 1 or 2 figures. But I want to transition to the other type of oil that Canada harvests, if you want to use that term, because I still see people not seeing the benefit of Canadian oil and a pipeline going across the country. And I found I guess a better way to explain it, put it into a better perspective for the people who don't see it. So let's take this back 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, when this health crisis began, and the gas prices had dropped drastically. We were paying like 75 cents per liter of gas. For any Americans who want to do the conversion liters to gallons, you can see how ridiculously cheap gas was at the time. But for my Canadians, 75 cents per liter for gas. If there was a pipeline flowing across Canada on a consistent basis, as opposed to importing our oil from the Middle East, your gas prices would look like that every day. Maybe not exactly that low, but it would be less than $1 more often than not. So bringing it back to...
I want to touch on
bringing
that.
it back to...
I'll let you go.
The whole mandate thing that's going on and the truckers' response. We want to go into the conditions that government is putting in place for you to make a living, which realistically there shouldn't be any other than the obvious needing a social insurance number, and I would say at least graduating high school for full-time work.
I'm not sure what I think about the social insurance number for a condition, but it is an identification. But regardless of the identifications, you should be able, in no way possible, for the government to be able to put in conditions to be able to work.
Yeah,
That's
and I remember
the whole thing
just
about freedom.
And I remember even just
provide for yourself.
Getting into the workforce when I first really finished school, like finished college, there were jobs that I would look at and jobs that I would apply to. This was before this ridiculous crisis came into effect. There were conditions where like, oh, entry level position, 3 to 5 years experience and a university degree, and it's like, well, I can have one or the other. Can't have both. Because if I'm just out of school and it's an entry-level position, I don't have 3 to 5 years experience in that field of work. I have a diploma or a degree, sure, but I don't have that work experience. Like, I have to start somewhere. And now it's even more difficult because now government is putting in restrictions saying people need the CV to work, which is ridiculous. That's never been a condition in the past.
That's eroding our freedom to be able to even provide for ourselves, which is terrible to work with. It's tyranny.
Yeah, it is tyranny. It is tyranny, and it's.
I hate to say it, but it's tyranny.
And I think,
but I'll say
and I've been trying to find the silver lining of what's been going on the past 2 years, and the one thing I can find is I think for Canadians at this point, more so than Americans, because Americans have always valued it, but I think for Canadians, we've learned that freedom cannot be taken for granted. Although it is a right that should have never been stripped from us in the first place, it cannot be taken for granted. And I want to also talk to the people out there who have given in and complied with the tyranny to this point, because there are some people who took the jab who said, well, I have to provide for my family, I have kids, whatever. I understand that. But what you also need to understand, and this is not an attack on anyone, this is just my perspective, it's just how I look at things. You also need to be able to teach your kids, the next generation of this country, that it's also important to stand up for something and to stand up for what you believe in, to be able to say no to things that you disagree with. The people who...
That actually makes sense, because you have to set an example for your kids. What isn't a better example than to stand up for very valuable things in the country? Your kid will look at you
and respect it too. Because the other thing too is you say, oh well, if I don't take it, I'll lose my job and I won't be able to provide for my family. No, that's illegal. They can't make you put a chemical in your body against your will in order to keep your job. I'm going to bring up the Harvey Weinstein case here because I can, because we're keeping this unfiltered. Let's put this common phrase into people's heads, because this sparked a very controversial movement too. Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood. Put this in you or you're going to lose your job. Although at the time it wasn't a jab. It was something else much worse.
Yeah, that was.
But it was coercion.
It was coercing. I'll go as far as that. It was just coercion to be able to work.
Like,
You shouldn't be,
No.
before
You
can
need
work.
to stand up for the rights that you were given, granted, the day you were born. And we touched on this in the last podcast, so the last episode, and so I don't really want to jump into it too much again. But schools never taught you what your rights were, for the reason that they could then, since they are part of the agenda, they could take it away without you knowing any better. Google. All the information is there for your informed consent for you to make a decision.
And not necessarily Google. I would say
It's
go on DuckDuckGo and find out
Yeah.
and really dig for information.
Yeah,
Google
and they're
does
going to
censor
censor us for this, but we don't care because we're the uncensored crew. Anyway,
We're gonna
this will be
put it
getting
on as
out.
many
Right now it's
platforms
just on YouTube. We're finding a way to get this on Spotify and eventually Apple Music or Apple Podcasts as well. Wherever you're going to get your audio from, we're going to try and get it there for you. Touch on it one more time. We've got merch. It's going to be in the description of this episode as well. Help us out. Help us continue making these episodes. Help us fund the podcast. I believe in episode 3, you'll be meeting one of our other co-hosts. In episode 4, you'll also be meeting another co-host as well. And then you will have met the whole crew. Of course, Evan and I are going to be the frequent ones you see, probably more often than not. Very exciting times ahead, though. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Like the video. Share it with everybody. We need to get this to grow. Make sure leaders of administration see this. Evan, anything you want to add?
Just have a good day, everybody.
See you later, folks.
Take care.